John, do we have anyone on the conference call?
Not yet, but the line has not been open.
Okay. All right. Kristen, are you ready to start, or?
Sure, anytime.
I'm just looking at the list here to see if I'm pretty sure we've got a quorum. I think we're still missing a few.
Pam, Elliot,
Can you hear me?
Frank.
I'm John Decker. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can, John.
Thank you.
I know that Rob is not coming and Frank maybe can't come. That's what I heard.
Correct. Yep. So it looks like maybe Elliot we haven't heard from.
Or Pam.
And Pam. Yep. Okay. Well, if you're ready to go, I'm ready to go.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Before the chair calls the meeting to order of the State Historic Preservation Review Board, I'm going to just make an announcement about our open meeting requirements. I should introduce myself. I'm Amy Spong. I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. And we have moved our meetings to virtual because of the state of emergency that we're in. And Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021, Subdivision 1, permits public bodies to hold meetings via telephone or other electronic means if the conditions of the section are met. And so essentially, for a body like ours in Minnesota, we still need to comply with open meeting law. And this is how we are able to do that during a state of emergency. So the following requirements are being met. And those are that all participating members can hear one another. So we'll do that and make sure first, as the chair does roll call, that's the way that we can assure that everyone can hear each other. Everyone hears each other. Members of the public at the physical meeting location can hear the whole discussion. Although we have no members of the public, this is all virtual. At least one member of the public body is present at the meeting location unless infeasible. And again, we don't have any members of the public body in a state building. So all board members are at virtual remote locations. And then finally, all votes are taken by roll call. So we are meeting that by taking roll call. So I'm all set now. Kristen, Chair Anderson, if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure. We're just going to do the roll call to start. And the list is in alphabetical order, as usual. So Kristen Anderson, first on the list. I'm present. Pam Brunfeld. Not or not yet. John Decker.
Here.
Lindsay Dyer.
Present.
Elliot James. Okay, Philip Koski.
Present.
Andrea Lavasser.
I'm here.
Steve Olson.
Present.
Chris Schulke.
Here.
Catherine Salmonson.
Here.
John Stark. John Stark, I see your name on the list. John, are you there? We'll come back to John later. Mary Warner.
I'm here.
And Frank White? Not or not yet. John Stark, are you there yet? We'll have another chance to pick him up later. So Amy and Dennis, you have some business to conduct before we start the introduction, is that right?
A couple announcements. Dennis has one and I have one. And before I do that, I do see that John Stark is not on mute. So I'm just hoping he doesn't have a problem with his sound. I also do want to point out in the lower left corner of your screen or monitor, there is a little kind of a bubble. You can click on that and chat. And you know, if you are having trouble hearing or weren't able to hear someone, you know, just type that in the chat function and let us know. And that's another way that you can also raise your hand if you do have a question during any of the presentations. Typically with the National Register item, there is an opportunity to ask questions that the chair will prompt you on. So just wanted to highlight a few of those things. And then also just a reminder, if you're not speaking, to keep your sound on mute. Sometimes there can be some feedback for others as well. So the first announcement that I just wanted to, chat icon is upper right corner. I'm just monitoring. If you're using a Mac, thank you, Member Koski. So I didn't know that the icon is in a different location if you are on a Mac. So appreciate that.
And Amy?
Really quickly, the first announcement that I just wanted to mention, Dennis Gardner already sent an email out to the whole board announcing that we have made an adjustment to the first 2 state review board meetings for 2021. Typically, we hold those in March and May, and we have moved those forward in the calendar to February and April. And we had a lot of discussion internally about this, and many of you probably know that our state historic tax credit program is sunsetting. It's set to sunset in June of 2021. And in addition to project applicants having an allocation certificate issued by our office by June 30th of 2021, they also need to have their property listed on the National Register if it is not yet listed. So we are hoping that this will help project applicants. It does mean that brings forward the deadlines starting already in November and December of this year for a February meeting. So, I know there's a lot of consultants and nomination authors that are very accustomed to our calendar schedule of meetings that we typically have with the State Review Board, but we're hoping that this works for all of our board members and for our consultants as well, and with the intent that it's there to help. Maybe there's a little more certainty by having a little bit earlier meeting. And you all know too that we're not the last stop. The State Review Board and the deputy SHPOs, then recommendations get forwarded to the National Park Service, to the keeper of the National Register. So we want to make sure that there's enough time for that whole process to happen. And we're really encouraging anybody who still needs to get their property listed, that it's really that February meeting date that is really that's the one that you need to be working toward, and getting on that agenda and working toward those deadlines with National Register staff here at SHPO. And if that's not going to happen, then they'll need to reach out to staff as soon as possible. So Dennis. Dennis, there you go.
Yep, here I am. I just had one quick announcement to let everybody know that the 4 studies that we looked at the last meeting have been accepted by the National Park Service. So we have looked at the Winona Athletic Club in Winona, United States Bedding Company in St. Paul, Sound 80 in Minneapolis, and then the multiple property documentation form for Prince. And all of those were accepted by the National Park Service. So we just wanted to let you guys know. Thank you.
Okay. Amy and Dennis, anything else? Okay.
Nope.
So I saw John Stark and John Stark's evil twin showing up on the list of participants. I saw the mute go on and the mute go off. So I assume that means that John is there for our roll call. And I'll just try again.
I am here.
Hi, John. Hi, John S.
Hi. Welcome from beautiful Governor Dodge State Park in middle of Wisconsin.
Excellent. Jealous.
That's where I grew up.
Really? Cool.
Yeah, Dodgeville, Wisconsin.
Cool. All right. Well, I don't know if it's legal for you to be in Wisconsin and taking part in this meeting, John. So we'll just hope that that's okay.
It's just south of Frank Lloyd Wright, so it just ties in perfectly.
Okay, that's good. That's excellent. And I don't see Pam or Elliot yet, but are they calling in maybe? Any indication that they're still here? Well, they'll get their chance at the end of the welcome because, as you know, you get to introduce yourselves alphabetically, of course. So good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm currently chair of the review board. The board's purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for the property that will be considered tonight. This nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of the nominated property, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend this meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about a particular property. You're welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether that property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nominations. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to owners of nominated properties and to other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register program has also been sent to them. Each of the nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nomination, and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spahn. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and that the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. Before we begin, I would like the members of the State Historic Preservation Review Board to introduce themselves, briefly stating the role they fill on the review board and their particular expertise. We'll go in alphabetical order again, as usual, which means I go first. I'm Kristen Anderson. I'm one of the architectural historians, and that's because I'm an architectural historian. I teach at Augsburg University. So we'll try one more time. Pam is next. Board member Brunfeld? Okay, we're on to board member Decker.
I'm John Decker. I'm a member at large and I'm a semi-retired archivist, and I enjoy Minnesota history.
Thanks, John. Board member Dyer.
Hi, I'm Lucy Dyer. I am a board member at large as well. And my expertise is public history, archivist, librarian, and human-centered design.
Thank you, Lindsay. And Elliot James. Elliot, are you here yet? Okay, board member Koski.
I am Philip Koski. I am representing as a historical architect, and I am a practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thanks, Philip. Board member Lavasser.
I am a prehistoric archaeologist, and I am coming to you from beautiful Bemidji, Minnesota.
Thanks, Andrea. Board member Olson.
My name's Steve Olson. I am a member at large, and I am a licensed practicing civil engineer.
Thanks, Steve. Board member Schulke.
Chris Schulke. I am the executive director of the Ottertail County Historical Society and chairman of the Fergus Falls Heritage Preservation Commission. I'm a
Thanks,
member
Chris.
at large. Yep.
Board member Solomonson.
I'm Kate Solomonson. I'm an architectural historian, and I teach architectural history in the School of Architecture at the University of Minnesota.
Thanks, Kate. Board member Stark.
I'm John Stark. I'm a historic architect, and I practice as an architect in Minneapolis.
Thanks, John. And Board Member Warner.
Hi, this is Mary Warner. I am a member at large. I am the Executive Director of the Morrison County Historical Society and a public historian.
Great, thanks, Mary. And Board Member White. Frank, are you with us yet? Okay. So now we're on to the approval of minutes from our May meeting, May 12th, 2020. Any discussion about the minutes, corrections, changes, updates? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Motion Schulke to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
Motion Stark to approve, or second.
Thanks, John. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say, uh-oh, sorry, we can't do that. Kristen Anderson says yes. Board Member Decker?
Aye.
Board Member Dyer?
Aye.
Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser?
Yes.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Yes.
Board Member Solomonson?
Abstain.
Board Member,
Absence.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member Warner?
Aye.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, and now we move ahead to the presentation of our one and only nomination tonight, the Erin Carlson Corporation on Central Avenue, Minneapolis, Hennepin County. And just a reminder, everybody, if you will mute your microphones while the presentation is going on, that'll be great. Thank you.
Good evening, board. My name is Jenny Way. I'm the National Register Architectural Historian for the State Historic Preservation Office. I am going to ask my colleague John to forward the slides as we move forward with this. It is nice to be back with you. Tonight, we are looking at the Erin Carlson Corporation in Minneapolis, Hennepin County. The authors are Lauren Anderson and Tamara Lute, New History. Next slide, please. The Erin Carlson Corporation factory is an industrial complex constructed in phases between 1905 and 1987. Here we see a view of the southwest elevation of the factory complex and site, camera facing northwest. Next slide, please. The 3.6-acre site is located adjacent to the railroad tracks historically belonging to the St. Paul and Pacific Railway, now known as the BNSF Railway, and within an area of concentrated industry in the city's northeast neighborhood. There are two principal components of the complex, the factory building and the wood-framed lumber shed. Each of these components is composed of sections built at various times, with the earliest built in 1905 and the last contributing element built in 1945. The image at the right is a closer view showing the various sections and their contributing status. Next slide, please. The Erin Carlson Sash and Door Company was founded in Minneapolis in 1891. Originally known as the Carlson and Allen, the company manufactured various types of millwork for public buildings and upper-class homes. Its founder, Erin Carlson, was a Swedish immigrant who began his Minnesota career working in Stillwater lumber camps in the 1800s. From an initial roster of 6 employees in 1891, the company expanded to more than 100 employees by 1905. Next slide. In the early 1920s, Carlson's company, by then known as Erin Carlson Incorporated, began to specialize in sandblasting. Though not the first or only manufacturer to utilize this finishing method, the firm found a market niche in providing custom-made sandblasted interior woodwork. Rather than supplying stock items as it had in the past, the company received specialized commissions for large public buildings across the United States. At left, we see the south elevation of the main factory building and a 1943 storage and office additions, camera facing northwest, and on the right, the northwest and southwest elevations of the 1910 warehouse, camera facing east. Next slide. The onset of World War II in 1939 brought significant changes to Erin Carlson Incorporated. Beginning in July of 1940, the company engaged in the production of pontoon bridge components that were shipped to the European and Pacific theaters. Over the course of 5 years, the company shipped approximately 30 million board feet of components to the battlefront. Here we see the northwest elevation of the 1928 warehouse addition, camera facing southeast, and on the right, the southwest elevation of the 1928 warehouse addition, camera facing northwest. Next slide. Here we see the east elevation of the L-shaped circa 1928 factory addition, camera facing southwest, and on the right, the northeast elevation of the 1943 warehouse addition, camera facing southeast. Next slide. Here we see the northwest and southwest elevations of the 1943 warehouse addition, camera facing east, and at right, the southwest and northeast elevations of the circa 1945 painting shed, camera facing west. Next slide. Pontoon bridges, also known as floating bridges, are temporary bridges that are often used in wartime or in response to national disasters. The portable bridges are comprised of wood structural materials and decking attached to floats or shallow boats. The individual bridge sections, called pontoons, are linked together by wood stringers. Next slide. According to a 1945 newspaper article about the company's wartime production, quote, the manufacturer produced planking for most of the 10 and 25-ton pontoon bridges across rivers in Burma, China, and India, along with Lido Road, the Philippines, through France, Belgium, and Holland, unquote. Here we see the southeast and northeast elevations of the west woodshed, camera facing west, and on the right, the southeast and southwest elevations of the woodshed, camera facing north. Next slide. Because of the large volume of bridge components produced by the company during the war, Erin Carlson Incorporated received the Army-Navy E Award in March of 1945. The E Award was given to companies which achieved excellence in production of equipment to support the war effort. Here we see interiors. On the left is the second level of the main factory building, camera facing northwest. On the right is the first level of the same building, camera facing south. Next slide, please. Of the more than 85,000 American companies that produced materials to support the war, only 5% were awarded the E Award, making the award the highest honor presented to individual firms which supported the war effort. Approximately half of the E Awards went to small plants, defined as companies with fewer than 500 employees, like Erin Carlson. On the left, we see the 1943 warehouse addition, camera facing west, and on the right is the first level of the circa 1912 covered walkway and garage, camera facing northeast. Next slide, please. Notably, Erin Carlson Incorporated was the only Minneapolis-based lumber mill to win the Army-Navy E Award. The award became an integral component to the company's wartime and post-war identity, with articles appearing in newspapers and photographs of the award-winning team appearing in company promotional material. Next slide. After the war, Erin Carlson Incorporated returned to a specialization in architectural woodwork. Though the company's Central Avenue factory underwent some alterations and additions during the late 1930s and the 1940s, the site saw few external changes after 1951. In 2019, Erin Carlson sold its Central Avenue factory. On the left is the second level executive office, camera facing southwest. At right is the interior of the west woodshed, camera facing northwest. Next slide. On the left, we see the water tower on the roof of the L-shaped circa 1928 factory addition, camera facing northwest. and at the right, the 1943 entrance vestibule at the primary southwest elevation, camera facing northeast. The period of significance for this property is 1940 to 1945. The level of significance is local. It's eligible National Register Criterion A. The area of significance is industry. The period of significance for the property is 1940 to 1945 to correspond with the company's wartime production. The Erin, next slide. Oh, sorry, and one more. The Erin Carlson Corporation contributed to the war effort through its manufacture of pontoon bridge components during World War II and was the only Minneapolis lumber mill to win the Army-Navy E Award for its industrial production. Because of its association with the wartime lumber industry in Minneapolis, the complex is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. We do have one piece of correspondence for this property. The Sheila Vemmer, the senior city planner for historic preservation at the City of Minneapolis and the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, writes, the Commission supports the nomination and concurs that the Erin Carlson Corporation meets national criteria A for industry for its association with wartime lumber. The Commission provided the following comments. Multiple commissioners commented that the nomination was well done and they were happy to see the property come through as a nomination. And the Commission expressed preliminary support for the property owner potentially nominating the building for a local landmark designation. Any questions, Chair Anderson?
Thank you, Jenny. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You haven't lost your touch.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, we didn't think you would, but still. Thank you for that.
Possible.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment about this nomination? Anyone want to add anything or make any updates or anything? Okay, and then we turn to the board. Any comments or questions about the nomination from the board members? Anything? Anyone?
Don't be shy.
This is Mary Warner.
Hi, Mary.
And,
thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I believe Ginny said in 2019, the Erin Carlson company sold the buildings. Do we know what the new owners plan to do? And is this perhaps a tax credit project?
We have not had any official document. Wait, I say that. We have not had any official documentation that this is going to be a tax credit project, but given the industrial nature, it is always a possibility. I have not spoken to the consultant to discuss what the plans for the new building are.
Okay, thanks.
Certainly.
Any other comments or questions? Board Member Stark.
Yes, you saw that I took my name off mute, didn't you?
I did see that.
That's why I had to sign in twice. It didn't work the first time. I had no sound. I'd like to, repeat what the HPC has said about a well-done presentation. I found it easy to follow through, and I really liked the diagrams at the end and the Sanborn map references and what was there. Kind of a little more history than just the 1940s period that it's really being nominated for. So that was very interesting, but I'd support this project.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Board Member Koski has his hand raised.
Philip, go ahead.
Board Member Koski, I just had a question about the site adjacent to the building between the rail line and the building. I know that currently there is a parking lot. I was wondering if we knew any more about the history of that part of the site, if that had rail sidings or how that was used and evolved over time.
I do not have that information offhand, Board Member Koski. I would be happy to find that information for you if you're interested. Given the industrial nature and the fact that it is on a rail line, I would guess that there was a siding at some point that entered. I mean, we know that there were that entered into the building at one or more points.
Just to follow up then, I mean, I assume that potentially if there are rail spurs on that part of the site, they may have been paved over with asphalt, so they may still be extant. I just wonder if there's been any kind of archaeology done to determine if there are artifacts like that still on site.
I don't believe there have been any archaeological studies done at this site. The consultant would have noted it, and I happen to know they don't have an archaeologist on staff. However, there are rail sightings extant within the building.
Okay, thank you.
This is Board Chair Anderson. I think that there was something about the previous use of that part of the site in the boundaries discussion, and maybe the consultants could jump in since they maybe know this proposal better than we do. But I think that there was some reference to that and why the boundary was in closer to the buildings that still survive. Anybody have anything on that? I do have two screens open right here, but not the right one for me to check that recollection.
We do have the consultant here, Tamara Lunt, and she did put in the chat. I'm just reading. It says she says the rail siding is actually located within the building.
And I can just field the question about archaeology too, if that's useful. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. So first of all, there is rail siding that they ran it through the building so the train could come through, and that's still there. And then you're right, the boundaries are close to the building, in part because there's a funny area of land where it slopes up to the tracks that is still owned by the railroad and has always been owned by the railroad. And then the parking lot has historically always been open and loading space. So it was parking as far as we were able to document. Jenny is correct. We did not do archaeological site excavation or testing on the site. That was not the path we were headed down. And the owner of the building, who may do a tax credit project, the world looks very different right now than it did when they started this path. They are not planning to do major ground movement, basically. They're not going to dig down. So they recognize the fact that if not rail archaeology, from an industrial archaeological standpoint, they don't want to disturb any potential artifacts. So they'll leave that as it is.
Thank you. That's helpful. Other comments or questions from board members?
This is Board Member Decker.
Go ahead, John.
Hi. I agree with Board Member Stark about the history. I really enjoyed reading it. I agree with the local significance, but winning the war on both fronts, I think, has kind of been forgotten by a couple generations. And I'm really glad that this is up for the register.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Are we ready for a motion?
Board Member Decker, I move for nomination.
Thanks, John. Is there a second?
Board Member Schulke, second.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All right. Board Chair Anderson votes yes. Board Member Decker?
Aye.
Board Member Dyer?
Yes.
Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser?
Yes.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Yes.
Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
And Board Member Warner?
Aye.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Now we have an update and discussion of the preservation plan. So Amy, did you say Mike is doing that? No, you said Mike was not doing that.
We have two staff that are part of the planning team, and that's Coop and Catherine Sandlin.
Catherine,
So
okay.
I'll have them maybe introduce themselves and what they do in the SHPO office. But before they jump in, Jenny reminded us that she was missing for the last two state review board meetings in March and May. And I completely missed it. So yes, I do want to have a warm welcome back to Jenny. We're very happy to have her back, and so is Dennis. I think I might have missed it because I feel like we've all been on a little bit of a leave.
Well, you don't see me in the office, so that makes sense.
That's right. So welcome back.
Thank you.
And congratulations, right?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, so if we want to jump into our next item with Mike and Catherine.
Hello, everyone. This is Mike Coop. I'm the Certified Local Government Coordinator for SHPO and a member of the new preservation planning team, along with Catherine and several other staff.
Yeah, and I'm Catherine Sandlin. I'm a design reviewer with the State Historic Preservation Office, and I'm acting as the project manager for the preservation plan effort. And the camera on my laptop is not functioning at the moment, so you can imagine whoever you'd like in your screen as I speak. So what we'd like to do with you this evening is spend a little time going over the information that we have so far regarding the new plan. A week ago, we sent you the PowerPoint that you'll be looking at right now. So hopefully you had a chance to review that briefly at least. And I'm going to just quickly summarize the information that's provided in those 9 or so slides. We want to provide a summary of the comments that you as the State Review Board gave to us about a year ago. Secondly, we want to provide a summary of the engagement efforts that we've had to date. Third, we want to talk about the themes that have emerged so far from the conversations that we've had and the information we've been gathering. And then finally, we want to talk about how those themes relate to the potential goals that we will be identifying for the future plan. And so with that, John has given me control. I'm not exactly sure how I would advance the slide, though, John.
Mike, you can either use there's slide controls in the lower left corner, or you can just click and it will advance it to the next slide.
Oh, I see. Whoops. Sorry, I'm not finding that lower left control. There we go. So what you see right now is actually quite a reduced version of the comments that the members of the review board gave us that were from the interview that Rob Skalecki conducted with all of you roughly a year ago or so. There were a whole lot more comments and information contained, much more so than you see here in these 10 bullet points. So I'm going to just, I won't read these per se, but I'm going to elaborate on each one a little bit just to kind of refresh your memory. For the first bullet point, we were hearing a lot about ensuring that we could make the plan as accessible as possible so that it would reflect the diverse population and the regions of the state. Secondly, there were points raised by a lot of board members about what was defined as the rural-urban divide, that's an issue, and that SHPO itself should strive to have more of a presence in greater Minnesota, particularly through face-to-face meetings and participation at various community events. On the next bullet point, the comments sort of revolved around the idea that, you know, while we recognize that there are these 50+ heritage preservation commissions that are scattered around the state and they play a very vital role, communities in rural areas of Minnesota, particularly those where there isn't a preservation commission presence, really have a much lesser role to play. They have a lot less power to advocate for community-centered preservation, and we need to try to address that. The next bullet point focuses on kind of the broader question about what's being done to monitor the progress from the plan that was done, basically covering the 5-6 year period from 2012 to 17. Many of the board members were asking, is there a way to check on, you know, whether the goals and strategies need to be worked on or improved? And I think the point that was being hammered home was that we want to make sure that this is, for the current plan, that it's going to be put into place and not just something that, as they say, gets thrown on a shelf or, you know, talked about in theory but not actually implemented. Next, there were a lot of comments about ensuring that younger people could get involved in the preservation movement. It was pointed out that there are a lot of things that millennials want: walkable cities, breweries, cafes that are already present within particularly historic urban cores, and so we should highlight that. And then as a follow-up, the next bullet point kind of ties in with the previous, where the idea is that we need to try to involve students a great deal more in actual preservation work, real preservation work, as a form of, you know, helping them to build community and feel as though they belong and are you know, much more integrated and involved in their own communities. Next, there needed to be, the feeling was, better communication and training and particularly funding opportunities between our office and the county historical societies, which are viewed as being really on the front lines for, you know, particularly local and rural preservation issues. One of the major challenges next was identified was convincing people that preservation is it's really an investment, a positive investment, and simultaneously an economic driver, but that it's also part of a long-term process regarding, you know, demonstrating the immediate fiscal gains. That's something that is harder to pinpoint and harder for people to understand because it doesn't happen immediately. So I think the point was we need to really emphasize that point. And then there were comments raised about basically tying in sustainability with preservation. The two kind of go hand in hand. And then the final point that a number of board members raised was that our National Register program needs to be promoted in a much greater way. We need to do a better job explaining what it is and what the benefits are and so forth. So, do I still have control, John, or did you take it back because I am a Luddite?
You still have control.
Because we can move to the next slide. Apologize. Okay. So, talking about our engagement efforts to date, we basically kicked off our engagement efforts with the plan roughly a year ago at our Preserve Minnesota conference, actually in St. Cloud. And subsequent to that, we've had quite a number of different events, different activities. As far as the actual formal events, we can identify 7. The conference was 1. We participated in Archaeology Day. So the slide image, the photograph in the upper left with the tent there is actually taken from Archaeology Day. We had a really terrific turnout there. David Mather played a big role in helping us to organize that. It was, perfect weather, as you can see, a lot of good participation. Some of the other events that we've participated in include attending the AIA, the American Institute of Architects Minnesota Chapter conference, the Midwest Archaeological Conference that was in Mankato. We attended the Open Streets event on West Broadway in North Minneapolis. The bottom slide is a view taken from our table looking out on Broadway there. Several staff attended the American Planning Association Minnesota Chapter Conference. We also did a talk at the CMA, the Council of Minnesota Archaeology Conference in St. Cloud. We also had planned to go to the State Fair. That obviously didn't pan out, and our budget doesn't allow for us to open up or to sell food there like some vendors are trying to do right now, but we did talk about that. And I think it's important to note that the online survey that we did really, I think we got tremendous results, very positive results, well over 1,000 respondents. In some cases, people didn't complete the survey totally for one reason or another. But we thought that, especially compared to the last plan where we did have a survey available, that the numbers were much, much higher than before. We did consult, the bullet point there references the 11 tribes in Minnesota. We were able to meet with 4 of those tribes with Leslie Coburn from our staff kind of leading the efforts there, organizing the other staff involved with those meetings. At the conclusion of that 4th meeting, soon after that, the pandemic hit, and unfortunately we weren't able to do any additional outreach efforts with particularly our TIPOs, but Leslie had a meeting just recently with her team about that, and they're very eager to move forward and continue contact with the remaining tribes and have additional engagement with them. So, we're optimistic that that will continue to pan out. We also conducted interviews with almost 20 different partner agencies and various preservation organizations. The photograph in the upper right of the slide shows some of the staff from Minnesota Housing that we did a formal interview with. They were one of the many partner agencies. We had facilitated conversations with those stakeholders that were led by staff from MAD, which stands for the Minnesota Management Analysis and Development Group, and some of the other organizations. They'll be very familiar to you that we met with the Minnesota Historical Society, MnDOT, DNR, DEED, Rethos, otherwise known as the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, and there were many others. So with MAD's help, we had specific interview questions that we, had in advance that we sent to people. So we felt like we had some really solid conversations, got a lot of good information with those partners. We also did, with an amazing amount of work and help from Catherine, I really have to give her all the credit here for the meeting in a box, and some of the preservation commissions and communities and county historical societies. I think Fergus Falls, Ottertail was one of them, participated in hosting a meeting in a box. Basically, it was set up so that a nonprofit organization or a community group, could actually host a meeting and encourage group conversations. And there were questions set up in advance that were mailed in this packet of materials. And we got really good responses. I think when Catherine and I talked about this initially, we were discussing feeling like if we got maybe 3 or 4 back, we'd be really happy. So to have 12 of them returned, was really outstanding. And then finally, I think the most important point to raise is that through all of these various interviews and meetings and so forth, we felt like we really got a lot of very thoughtful, important, powerful comments through our entire engagement process from all of our partners, who made it clear that they want to continue to work with us in a big way. So if we can go to the next slide, what we want to do next is actually allow you to weigh in on what we've presented so far, reflect a little bit on the questions that we asked you from the past, previous, roughly a year ago. There were only 4 of those questions that Rob asked you about during the interviews. But the idea is that, if you could think back and respond to the questions now, or just to what we're discussing regarding the plan, is there anything that you feel would be important enough to add in or even change about the feedback you provided already? And I'm going to mute my microphone temporarily and allow the floor to be open. So if anyone wants to chime in, please feel free to do so.
This is this board member Schulke. I just have a brief comment. One thing that I think is important is to somehow change or alter the image of SHPO or the public perception in some circles, being obstructionists and obstruction to progress and so forth and so on. I think that's probably always has been an issue, but of course dealing with here in Fergus Falls with especially with the state hospital and with the city, we're constantly hearing, SHPO won't let us do this, SHPO won't let us do that. There's so many roadblocks. How can we improve the public perception that, we're really on, your side. We're trying to, do the best we can.
Well, Chris, I think you're right that has been an issue. It's been a perception problem for a very long time. And I guess from conversations I've had with SHPOs around the country, we're not unique in that sense. It doesn't change the fact that it exists. And I don't know that there's an easy solution. My feeling is that doing additional education and outreach about what the office does can go a long way to that end. But
I think you guys have oftentimes spoken till you're blue in the face about what you're really trying to do, but people often just don't want to listen. So it's tough, but just to make you aware of that.
Yep, appreciate the comment.
Yes, sir.
Mike, could I add a little bit to this prompt? This is Catherine. And we obviously can't stop as a planning team asking questions and gathering information and trying to engage people. So it's just something we've been doing for the last year, and I think we want to continue to do it. We, as a planning team, sat down and we were thinking about how much has changed in our world in the last year. And when we started our planning process, had we known where we'd all be today, what would we have done differently? And that's where this question came from. And so we were really interested in hearing from you all, because it's been a little bit over a year since we connected with you, about how has your perspective changed about preservation in the state of Minnesota? And do you have different priorities now, or things that you think the state should be pursuing or focusing on more readily in regards to preservation?
This is Board Member Warner. I know that I brought up like a year ago or so, really concentrating on mid-century modern buildings as part of the plan. And I think I came to that conclusion having worked within the mid-century field, and it's very easy, I think, to dismiss buildings that look plain or modernistic if they're too many of them, or they're not fancy enough, and that kind of thing. So for me, sort of calling out those buildings specifically for consideration for National Register or for preservation, they're at that sort of danger point where they're around that 50 to 60 years old, and people are going to start wiping them out just because they don't see them as important.
Very good point, Mary. And I do remember you commenting on that in the past. Yeah, it's definitely something that's on our radar screen.
Thanks.
Hello, this is Board Member Solomonson, and I appreciate a lot what I'm seeing here. It's a great distillation of what I know was a lot of feedback. One of the issues that comes to mind that I think could be brought forward, although I think it's implicit here, is foregrounding issues of race, ethnicity, various forms of diversity, especially given where we are right now. I think this has become all the more important.
Thank you for that feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree, Catherine. I mean, it's definitely something the office has talked about, and if anybody has been, paying attention on various websites, their webinars, conversations, events that are happening that revolve around those topics, and some of our staff have been able to participate in some of them. I think it's an important conversation we need to have.
Mm-hmm.
This is Board Member Koski. The 2 points that were distilled about reaching out to Greater Minnesota related to preservation topics and issues, and also engaging young people made me consider what is the relationship between SHPO and the university and colleges and the state system that reach out all across the state. And I was thinking more specifically about the annual conference that we have. And we had one 2 years ago in Winona, 2 or 3, and then also in St. Cloud. And maybe there was an opportunity there to engage faculty members or people who run programs, whether they're in history, or I'm not exactly sure how it would line up. But is there a way of engaging the higher ed system as a way of making connections to Greater Minnesota and young people?
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Good comment. And I don't know how to summarize my thoughts in a coherent way, but I think in St. Cloud, for instance, and I think this has been the case with our conference when it's been held in cities where there is a university presence, we've been somewhat successful in connecting with faculty that in some manner, have an interest in what we do or have some kind of a connection with SHPO. And as I say that, I'm trying to remember the faculty member's name in St. Cloud State who helped lead a walking tour of one of the neighborhoods there. And I think that's an example where I believe some of the students helped him and they were volunteering during the conference and so forth. That represents a start, I guess. It's certainly not, something that I would view as a major success just because we did it at the conference was in St. Cloud. That's great, but setting up some kind of a more sort of cohesive program that goes across, various campuses would be much more preferable. And I think in Winona, we also made a connection with somebody at Winona State, but I think it was a lot more tangential there. But I mean, to your point, obviously there are going to be students within those programs that we need to be aware of, and we need to be able to reach out to them and make sure that, that they know about the work that we do. So I think appreciate the thought about that, and again, it's something that we've considered in the past, something that we want to continue to work on.
This is Amy Spong. I really appreciate that comment, and we want to continue to get feedback from the board members. But while it's fresh in my mind, I just came from today. I was in Duluth with the executive director of the Northern Bedrock Historic Preservation Corps, and I believe we had some Corps members that volunteered at the St. Cloud the evening event, the reception event last year at our conference. But the reason why I had gone up there today was because the chair, Amy Giorgiani of the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation, came to actually join one of the hitches, one of the Corps members, as they were traveling up to the halfway ranger station, and she's camping with them tonight and going to be actually doing some work. She's very interested in Northern Bedrock, and they've been advising. Chair Giorgiani set up a task force this spring to try to build capacity in those traditional trades. And I had a chance today to talk to a lot of young people. They had a lot of really great questions for me, and it was just really good to, the fact that I was talking with young people today in preservation was really heartening, and I'm glad that these conversations and these suggestions are coming forward. But that's another component of getting young people interested, not just in the more architectural historian and archaeology, but also those trades programs as well. Oh, and the final thing I will just mention is I did tell the chair, Giorgiani, that we actually have a current strategy goal of supporting and building capacity in trades programs, and she was very impressed by the fact that we had something in our statewide preservation plan, and she had wondered how many other SHPOs have or states have this kind of support for traditional trade programs and for young people in particular.
That's great. Thanks.
One follow-up to your question and comment, Philip, is actually reminds me of an email that I got from your fellow board member, Steve Olson, when he saw the PowerPoint that we had mailed out in advance of tonight's meeting. He was inquiring about how we can do a better job of providing meaningful experiences and work, particularly for, in their case, in Eden Prairie, the Preservation Commission, the HPC, has a student member. And there are a couple of cities in Minnesota where the commissions allow for student members to be, on the commission serving. And I got back to Steve, and I had to sort of admit that I didn't really have a good answer for him because we don't often have students in a formal way involved serving on a commission. And clearly, some of the work that's being done when commissions are active, they often hire a professional consultant. And so the consultant's doing the work, the commission is often reviewing that work. But if I can read between the lines about what Steve was asking, it sounded like he was interested in, trying to find a way to identify something that was more meaty and meaningful that student could actually be involved with. And I want to query some of my colleagues about that and see if we can come up with some answers. But I wanted to throw that out and make sure that the other members of the State Review Board were aware of Steve's inquiry. And I see he has unmuted his microphone, so maybe Steve is going to chime in.
Just a couple things, Michael. Yeah, thank you for bringing that concern up. And actually, we have 3 or 4 students on our commission, and I think one of the things I'd like to do next is simply invite them to be guests at the next state review board and sort of watch the workings of what happens at this meeting. And that might be just a tangible first step for them to see a little bit more behind the curtain. So unless there's some heartburn with that, I think that might be my first step to engaging the students a little bit more.
Well, I see no reason why they couldn't join in, obviously if it's a virtual meeting especially, but I can't speak for my colleagues or those that are running the meeting. I'm not sure. I don't see any reason why a student could not come in as, just a guest, just like anyone else, a member of the public.
We would absolutely welcome that. Definitely.
Well, I don't want to cut our conversation short, and we can revisit this question, but it's a really good segue to the next part of our update for you all about the plan, which is the feedback that we have been receiving from our partners, from the public, and from the survey that Mike suggested. So if everyone is okay, unless someone had a burning thought they wanted to share, I may jump into that, and we can always come back to this discussion. I don't see anyone raising their hands. So Mike provided us a really nice overview of the public and partner. Thank you, John. The public and partner engagement our planning team and our colleagues at SHPO have conducted to date. We've had some great conversations. Now I'm going to share with you the initial results of those months that we've been talking with people, attending conventions and street fairs, and encouraging people to complete our survey. First off, resoundingly, we heard from people that preservation is important to preserving cultural identity and heritage, for access to historic resources, and to learn about Minnesota's history. It was our #1 response to our inquiries. It came up in almost every conversation we had. It was clearly a value that people had regarding preservation. But we also heard a whole array of other things. We heard about preservation's connections to economic health and the need for education and technical assistance, not to mention money. A desire to see improvements in regulatory structures, wanting to cultivate partnerships like Amy was talking about among interested groups. We heard about how essential accessible information is to understanding historic resources in our state. And we heard about inclusivity and a need to broaden perspectives and include more diverse communities, to Kate Salmonson's point. And the gap in designated archaeological sites and just knowledge of those sites. We heard about a yearning to increase Minnesotans' knowledge of cultural and historical resources and a desire to more fully integrate preservation into local planning. So we heard a lot of really aspirational ideas. We also heard some things that are threatening the success of preservation in our state, such as low lawmaker interest, coupled with public that doesn't fully understand or value preservation. That perception we've all heard that new is better than old. We heard about costs and financial barriers to doing preservation work and doing work in general regarding identifying resources. We heard about how pro-development policies often conflict with preservation and the two butt up against each other. We heard about shortages of skilled tradespeople and professionals, again, to the conversation we just had about engaging with college students and emerging tradespeople. And then we heard about climate change and all of the implications it has to preservation, our resources, and the work that we're doing. So that's a lot. We heard a really big spectrum of concerns and aspirations, and it really outlines the challenges and goals we have for our state. And as a planning team, our challenge is now, how do we take all this great feedback we've received and have it inform the written plan? So how do we actually use it to move forward? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been discussing as a process amongst the planning team and how we're hoping to move this forward. You can next slide. Well, we know that the themes are a direct reflection on the public's thoughts through the conversations we've had with them. And we also know that our planning team has determined that these themes that emerge during these conversations will be really used meaningfully in our plan. And how we've really come to a conclusion is we're going to use them as the foundation for the goals which kind of set up the stage for the plan document itself. So the themes that we just discussed will become part of a series of goals or paths that will guide the management or work related to historic and cultural resources for our state. And those plan goals will provide a preservation vision for the state as a whole, guidance for all preservation partners, so not just our office, but other people doing work in the state, and then give us some direction here in the SHPO office. Next slide, please. So one of our charges in writing the statewide preservation plan is that it should be achievable within the life of the plan, in our case, within the next 10 years. As the planning team reviewed the 15 themes, we really actually saw 5 summary themes rise up, which could embody the feedback we had received and easily become goal statements. The five summary themes that we saw were coordination and partnerships, sustainability, resilience, and climate change, costs, financial resources and benefits, education, technical assistance and information, inclusivity and diversity. So a lot of the things we just had in our previous conversation would fall very easily under these summary themes. Many of these broad summary themes are not surprising to us, right? It's things we've heard about and talked about within preservation and throughout the history of the preservation movement. So these are kind of reoccurring themes within the work we do. What I do find exciting about the work we've done in engagement and how we're mapping out the next steps in the plan is that we're going to use that public feedback in those 15 original themes to inform not just the goals, which I shared with you, but also the objective statements that may fall underneath each goal. I think it's just a really wonderful way that we can authentically utilize the feedback we've been receiving from the public, where they can actually see their voices in the plan, and it can truly be a representation of what we've heard from the state. So you can see under each summary theme here sits one of the original public engagement themes. So all 15 show up in this outline. This is not to say this is the final outline or where there may be more things added. Some more things may be simplified, but this is the direction that the planning team is moving. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to make sure that we don't lose sight of that overarching theme that we heard from the public over and over again, which is that preservation is important to preserve cultural identity and heritage, to access historic resources, and to learn about Minnesota's history. This time I'll open it up. Are there any questions about the feedback we received to date? I don't see any questions. So we'll move to our last slide. Again, I shared that we as the planning team we find ourselves constantly wanting to engage people and continue the conversation and continuing asking questions. So in that theme, we wanted to hear from you all as a group if there's some issues that you see specifically to a couple of the themes that we saw emerging. The inclusivity and diversity related to Minnesota's historic resources and preservation work would be the first theme I'd be interested in hearing. If there are any issues that you think are specific to preservation in our state or things that we should be thinking about as we're considering that goals regarding inclusivity and diversity, or even objectives, or action items that may be part of the plan.
Catherine, I've got a comment. Board Member Olson here, and we had our monthly HPC meeting last night, and we sort of wrestled with the inclusivity and diversity question a bit. And it seems that, at first we thought, well, we're sort of a volunteer organization, and we really need a champion to sort of advance what moves forward in the HPC. And there were a number of board members that just weren't satisfied with that sort of the default status and the champion that has an interest in the topic, that we really needed to be more proactive to ensure we're inclusive and capturing more diverse perspectives. And so we're going to think about, demographics and what things have looked like over the past 50 years as far as populations in our city, and trying to be a little more intentional about getting stories other than the default stories we've had in the past.
That's great to hear, Steve, and that's been part of our conversation regarding this too, is ways that we can bring more people into the conversation, invite more people to the table. And so it's really good to hear that is happening throughout the state. I think I saw a question pop up too. So Lindsay submitted a question: what is the plan for actively recruiting diverse perspectives? How is the language used in the questions inclusive?
So to follow up with that, this is Board Member Dyer. I'm wondering how, and you may have touched on this, but how did you actively recruit diverse perspectives in the survey? I'm thinking about, we talked about wanting student involvement, young people. Preservation is really complicated, and even for me, I'm always finding things that I'm always like treading in new territory, and so I'm wondering about how these future conversations are going to meet people where they are at, and not feel intimidating, and feel open to, like, they can be a part of the conversation and not feel like there's this wall between the professional community and them.
Yeah, absolutely. This was, if you're asking specifically about our plan, this was one of the values that we put forward when we were working on our engagement strategy. And I think we all could agree as part of the planning team that if we had an infinite budget and infinite time, we would have been able to execute our dream engagement plan to its fullest. We did some initial steps. We did things like attended Open Streets in North Minneapolis, which was a community that we don't see as many nominations coming out of, or tax credit projects, and that we haven't connected with more fully in the past. So we took some efforts to engage more fully with communities and go to places where we haven't been before. Were we able to execute that to the extent we would have loved to? No, but there's a nice, I don't want to say a but, it's a no, and we're really excited that our plan is a 10-year plan, which allows us a 5-year update. And in this process, we've learned a lot about engagement and connection, and we plan on, at that 5-year mark, having a really strong plan about an ongoing engagement, an engagement approach that would allow us to speak with more people who haven't been part of the conversation before, and meet more people where they are currently at. So thank you for that question. And we're always open to ideas. That's part of this conversation. So if you believe that there are ways we can strengthen our efforts, we are happy to hear those. We are happy to include those in our plan. Part of our plan will be a plan moving forward that will be check-in moments and times in which we will re-engage. Ideally, we won't unengage with people. We will continue the conversation and continue being open to feedback.
This is Board Member Warner, and I think this is one of those areas where you could possibly partner with county historical societies, because there's one in every county, and we have a pretty good idea, many of us, of what communities we have within our community, and some of those diversities that are not, it's not just current diversity, but what has happened in the past. I think a lot of our Native community from the Morrison County area would be something to tap into.
I appreciate that, Mary, and we acknowledge wholeheartedly that this type of work is about relationship building and making sure that it is an ongoing relationship, and so that is a really great idea. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Board Member Stark. Probably ramble on a little bit here, but just thinking back on how this stuff has changed because of COVID-19, and people are hanging around at Moore's families. They're hanging around locally, doing a lot more things, more in an intimate relationship thing. But what I see in preservation, you know, we talk about politicians and everything else, but the general public, that perception, I think what we need to do is really celebrate our successes. We need to let Greater Minnesota know why their local courthouse is important, or whatever building, you know, just the hardware store down the street, and that these buildings, maybe not, it's not a preserved Victorian house that's now a museum, that preservation has a vital thing to the community, can be a reuse, and it might be that mid-century modern school building that is now a senior apartment, or, you know, anything like that. If we celebrate it and let the general public know, it's like reading Larry Millett in Saturday's paper or Sunday's paper, you know, it's just interesting, but he writes about things that are lost. We need to talk about things that are saved. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback. And I would add things we don't yet know about, celebrating those that option of learning more about a more diverse group of properties, a diverse group of resources, and things that matter to a broader community.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment.
No, I completely agree. I don't mean to be a downer here. This is Board Member Solomonson. This also includes being willing to look at and mark the darker side of our history.
Right, we can't forget where we came from.
Very good points. Thank you. Well, maybe I'll pose the next question, and we can always loop back to our previous discussion if there's anything you would want to add that you didn't add from a year ago, or if you have some issues or ideas related to inclusivity and diversity in our preservation work here in the state. So for the next one, and we talked about this a little bit already, but education, technical assistance, and information access related to Minnesota historic resources and preservation work. Are there things that have been on your mind related to that? I know we heard a little bit about connecting better with universities and with those people who are emerging tradespeople. Are there other ideas or things you have always just really thought these are issues that should be addressed, and the plan would be the perfect place for those items to be addressed?
Hello, this is Board Member Solomonson again. One of the things I've talked with Ginny about this is that these National Register nominations are an absolute gold mine of information in all sorts of ways. And I know that that information is there, but I think making people more aware of what they can learn about their communities, and not just about their own communities through any given nomination, but each one tells a much larger story as well. So I think it's just helping people know what's already there, and that can also help engage them in thinking about what they might add.
Thank you for that feedback, Board Member Salmonson. That is something we heard through public engagement too, was just making the information easily accessible and more broadly broadcasted so that more people can connect and engage with it and see relevancy in their daily lives. So thank you.
This is Board Member Anderson, and I, just to jump on what Kate had suggested, I know this would be a huge project for someone other than me, so it's really easy for me to suggest that this would be a great idea. But when things go on the register, if there's an athletic club in Winona, isn't that where it was? It's been so long. Is there a way that through, say, county historical societies, we could say, look, these 4 things were just added, and do you have something like this in your town? Do you have an athletic club? Did you have an athletic club? The rules of the National Register are sometimes not helpful in that I mean, of course, we're trying to identify things that are really important, but if there are too many issues about integrity, then something doesn't count. Or I've been reading recently and hearing recently about a kind of obstruction that's in place with the National Register system for communities of color, for Native American communities, where the stuff they have just doesn't fit the rules, and so it doesn't count. But I'm wondering if there's some way that we can kind of take the things that there are files for instance, as Kate suggests about the nominations, or things at the moment that they're approved, to say, yes, this one just hit the list, but did you know that there are also 27 others around the state that we're aware of? And is there one in your community that's not on the list? And it might be a way to increase people's awareness about the National Register process, but also to make those kinds of connections to individuals and individual communities that help to make locations more meaningful.
Yeah, this is Board Member Schulke. It's almost like the development of a speakers bureau in a way. When the National Register nomination is approved, I mean, I'm just fascinated by the history that's presented in the nominations. That's one of the great pleasures of reading them. But then maybe, with each town, that's a place that's nominated in each town, there could be an accompanied program, public, either again now through Zoom or through an offer to go speak in the communities. So instead of just, again, put on the shelf with the keeper or on the National Register, we are then further engaging with the public in their community why this building or why this place is on the National Register. I mean, we've done that with a couple archaeological sites where the consultant came and spoke, and like Fort Julesson, and it's just really engaged the people, because we wanted to educate, inform the public what being on the National Register meant for a site.
Thank you, Board Member Schulke. I'm hearing another theme kind of presenting itself, which is using our own resources more wisely. So the information that we already have access to, and more broadly sharing that and encouraging people to access it, both for information purposes, but also as inspiration to potentially look at their own resources in their community. So That's really great feedback. Thank you. I'm always told to allow for those really long pauses, because eventually someone will step in, but I always jump in too soon. So I'm going to do is there anyone else with some ideas or questions regarding the plan and where we're currently at?
This is Board Member Warner. So something Kristen said about structures within, say, Native communities or communities of color that never quite fit eligibility. How do we find out from these different communities, well, what is it they want to preserve, and how do we elevate that, if it's not to the National Register, to some other form of recognition for the preservation efforts?
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Warner. That is, Ginny just wrote context development. That is part of it, and to your earlier comment is those connections with communities and relationships, and this is also connected to emerging professionals and training the next wave of historic preservationists, is empowering communities to identify the resources that are valuable to them and bringing those forward. I think that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing it. So with that, I want to thank you for your thoughtful answers and for listening to our update on where the plan currently is at. We are in the process of requesting a formal extension from the National Park Service due to the setback that we as a planning team and as an office have had related to the shutdown and to addressing a change in our work related to the COVID pandemic. And right now we're looking at ending our the writing portion of the plan in fall of 2021. So we do have some work that we're still planning on doing, and we do plan on reconnecting with the broader public. We were going to use this conversation that we're having with you tonight to help inform what sort of questions would be fruitful to ask the public. And we will be reconnecting with you all with an update on where we are at, hopefully at your next meeting. With that, is there any additional questions, ideas, parting comments regarding the statewide preservation plan?
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I see a question coming in, being typed on the, oh, I guess. No longer a question. Thank you. And thank you all for your thoughtful responses to our questions.
And
have a good evening.
Catherine, this is Amy Spong. I just want to jump in too here because, we made a decision quite a while ago that we were going to have a much more robust engagement process, and we were going to have an internal planning team, and we were going to do much of the work internally. I know that's been very difficult, and it has taken longer with COVID and some of the challenges that we've been dealing with. But I know there's a couple other SHPOs that are getting ready or in some stage of their preservation plan update, and several of them are writing RFPs and hiring outside people. And while that's great, I'm really proud that we are doing this work internally and that we have, really done this extra effort to do engagement. So I just want to thank the planning team because it's been challenging and they've done a lot of really great work that I'm really proud of so far. So it's exciting.
Thank you for that, Amy. Yeah, I do want to say when we were putting together our engagement plan, one group that hadn't been identified as needing to be engaged with as robustly was the SHPO staff themselves. So it's been really wonderful to work collectively with the entire team and our staff all on engagement and on thinking about what the plan will be. So thank you, Amy, for that, and thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Catherine. Anything else? Amy, Dennis, Jenny, have anything for us? Okay. All right. I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Schulke.
Thank you. Board Member Schulke makes a motion. Is there a second?
Board Member Warner, second.
Thank you, Mary. And I suppose I need to call the roll if I can find my list. Or we could just shout it out. Amy, is that okay? You can hear if there's a majority. All those in favor, please say aye. What?
I don't think we need to do the roll call for the final adjournment.
Here we go.
All you need is a motion. Yep.
All right. So we're good.
Thanks,
Everybody, very much.
Great job on
And
that master plan meeting there. Thanks.
we'll see you in November, right?
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.